Are you making these budgeting mistakes? Find out now. Welcome to our video on budgeting mistakes. Budgeting is an essential part of personal finance, but it can be tricky to get it right. Are you making these budgeting mistakes? In this video, we'll be sharing the top mistakes people make when it comes to budgeting and how to avoid them. Mistake number 1. Not having a budget. The first budgeting mistake we're going to talk about is not having a budget. A budget is a plan for how you're going to spend your money. Without one, it's easy to overspend and end up in debt. Here are a few examples of how not having a budget can lead to overspending. Let's say you're out shopping and you see something you want to buy, but you don't have a budget, so you don't know if you can afford it. Without a budget, you might buy it anyway and end up spending more than you intended. Or let's say you're at a restaurant and the menu is a little more expensive than you expected. Without a budget, you might order more than you intended to because you don't know how much you should be spending. So, what's the solution to this? Creating a budget. Here are a few tips for creating a budget. Start by listing your income and expenses. Set specific financial goals. Identify areas where you can cut back. Track your spending regularly. By following these tips, you'll be able to create a budget that works for you, and you'll be less likely to overspend. Mistake number 2. Not tracking expenses. The second budgeting mistake we're going to talk about is not tracking expenses. Tracking expenses is crucial to sticking to your budget. Without tracking, it's easy to overspend and not even realize it. Here are a few examples of how not tracking expenses can lead to overspending. Let's say you're out shopping and you buy a few things, but you don't keep track of what you're spending. When you get home, you realize you've overspent. Or let's say you're at a restaurant and you order a few drinks, but you don't keep track of how much you're spending. When the bill comes, you're surprised at how much you've spent. So, what's the solution to this? Tracking expenses. Here are a few tips for tracking expenses. Use a budgeting app. Keep receipts. Check your bank account regularly. Categorize your expenses. By following these tips, you'll be able to keep track of your expenses, and you'll be less likely to overspend. Mistake number 3. Not saving for emergencies. The third budgeting mistake we're going to talk about is not saving for emergencies. Saving for emergencies is crucial to financial stability. Without savings, unexpected expenses can lead to financial stress. Here are a few examples of how not saving for emergencies can lead to financial stress. Let's say your car breaks down and you need to get it fixed. Without savings, you might have to put the repair on a credit card and end up paying more in interest. Or let's say you lose your job and need to pay your bills. Without savings, you might have to borrow money and end up in debt. So, what's the solution to this? Saving for emergencies. Here are a few tips for saving for emergencies. Start by setting a savings. Automate your savings. Create a separate savings account. Save a portion of each paycheck. Mistake number 4. Not planning for long-term expenses. The fourth budgeting mistake we're going to talk about is not planning for long-term expenses. Long-term expenses, such as retirement, college tuition, or a down payment on a house, can have a significant impact on your finances. Without planning for them, it can be difficult to achieve your financial goals. Here are a few examples of how not planning for long-term expenses can lead to financial stress. Let's say you want to retire in 20 years, but you haven't been saving for retirement. Without a plan, you might not have enough money to retire comfortably. Or let's say you want to send your child to college, but you haven't been saving for tuition. Without a plan, you might have to take out a loan and end up with a lot of debt. So, what's the solution to this? Planning for long-term expenses. Here are a few tips for planning for long-term expenses. Set specific long-term financial goals. Create a plan to achieve those goals. Automate your savings. Consider using a financial advisor. By following these tips, you'll be able to plan for long-term expenses, and you'll be less likely to experience financial stress. So there you have it, the top budgeting mistakes people make and how to avoid them. Remember, having a budget, tracking expenses, saving for emergencies, and planning for long-term expenses are all essential for financial stability. We hope this video has helped you identify areas where you can improve your budgeting and given you some tips on how to do it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more budgeting tips and tricks.